Welcome back. We're following more breaking news. The White House says President Trump could meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. A White House official telling NBC News that the president could meet with his Russian counterpart as early as next week if Putin also agrees to meet with Ukrainian President Zelenskyy. A European official tells NBC News that Mr. Trump told European leaders on a call earlier that he plans to meet in person with Putin soon to discuss a possible ceasefire. Now, the news comes hours after the president's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, wrapped up a meeting with Putin in Moscow. The president calling that meeting highly productive on social media. Joining me now is NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba and NBC News reporter Matt Bodner. Thanks to both of you for being here. So, Monica, what are your sources telling you about when and where this potential meeting could take place? This is big news.
Yeah, and those are the big questions, Kristen. You know as well as I do that setting up a meeting between two major world leaders in any circumstance requires a lot of moving pieces, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of planning. So the idea that President Trump could meet with President Putin as early as next week, I'm told, is very significant, but it is still unclear how and when that would happen. And a big part of that condition is this idea that President Trump relayed to Steve Witkoff after he briefed him on the meeting that, yes, he's open to meeting with President Putin in person, but that he also wants to see if President Putin will meet with Ukrainian President Zelenskyy as well to discuss a possible ceasefire for the war in Ukraine. That's an important piece to all of this. But in terms of some potential venues, we know, for instance, that the Turkish President Erdogan has offered Istanbul as a venue. A couple of weeks ago, he said he wanted to help broker the talks. That's maybe one possibility. And in addition to that, the Vatican, the Pope, has also offered to potentially host those kinds of conversations as he has pushed for peace in recent weeks and months as well. So are those two possibilities? We just simply don't know. I'm told nothing has been locked down. And with timing, we know these things can slide, and that's a distinct possibility here as well. But it would obviously be a notable step as the president gave President Putin that 50-day deadline. He shortened it to 10 days. That's set to expire on Friday. But he is touting this great progress that was made in these diplomatic talks today in Moscow. So we'll see where that ultimately lands for future meetings.
We sure will. We know, Monica, of course, that President Trump also spoke with President Zelenskyy yesterday. Any key takeaways from that call? And was this meeting, do you know, a part of that call?
I think that they have loosely been discussing the possibility of some kind of summit for a while. We know that President Trump has really expressed his disappointment with President Putin, but he's really been firm about trying to see if there could be some kind of talks that could be scheduled with President Zelenskyy. So I think it stands to reason that they discuss these next steps or where this goes from here, in addition to this larger conversation in economic terms that the president is trying to levy these secondary sanctions and tariffs on countries that are doing business with Russia and that they say, the U.S. and the president argue, are fueling the Russian war machine. And we know that that has been a topic of conversation with President Zelenskyy as well. So this is a situation where the president is pushing for a major diplomatic breakthrough. He says after trying to do similar deals with other countries where he has had some success on stopping fighting elsewhere. But on the scale of the war in Ukraine, this would really be another level of diplomacy from this president. But he's trying to see if he can make some kind of impact there.
All right, Monica Alba at the White House, thank you so much for your great reporting, as always. Matt Bodner, let me turn to you now. Let's talk about the signals that we are getting from the Kremlin. Is there a sense that Vladimir Putin may be serious about meeting with Trump? As Monica just pointed out, this has been something that's been under discussion for quite some time.
Well, thank you, Kristen. Yes, I mean, the Kremlin really has wanted a meeting with President Trump for a long time. There's no doubt, really, in my mind, that this is something that's come up each time Witkoff has gone to Moscow. But they haven't yet really had a chance to respond to these latest developments out of the White House. Essentially, that's by design. Today's meeting and sort of the chronology of events was a bit interesting. There was some potentially mixed signaling. But, you know, really all we have from the Kremlin at this point comes from Putin's foreign policy advisor. His name is Yuri Ushakov. And he did put out a vague statement earlier today that's saying beyond the topic of Ukraine, the two sides discussed the prospects of a strategic partnership between the U.S. and Russia. That's a bid at restoring business ties, most likely. But really, the important takeaway from Ushakov's statement was in reference to the signals from Trump on the Ukraine issue and the war by Friday. He said that Putin's fully aware of the situation. He said that Putin gave his own signals to Trump via Witkoff. That now appears to be this idea, let's meet. He wouldn't talk about what that was just yet. He wanted Witkoff to go talk to Trump, give them a chance to discuss this meeting, put out their own statements, and basically said, we'll comment on this tomorrow. So I think we won't hear very much from the Kremlin until tomorrow morning. But it is important to keep in mind, Witkoff, before going to Moscow, had referred to these conversations as Russia's last chance to reach a deal before the U.S. moved forward with various threats to impose sanctions. So it did appear things could be at a tense stage. But again, we really do need to hear more from the Kremlin tomorrow.
And Matt, talk about the role that Witkoff has played. He has met with Vladimir Putin 3 times now. He's been significant in trying to move these talks forward.
Absolutely. I mean, he's been basically the shuttle diplomat here, and he liaises a lot with a very similar figure in the Kremlin, a man who's sort of been around in Moscow for a while, Kirill Dmitriev. He actually was sort of the spokesman for the Russian COVID vaccine. But his star has risen significantly as essentially the liaison to Witkoff. And a lot of that early discussion we saw between the Trump administration and the Kremlin when Trump first came to office, a lot of the friendlier tones was facilitated by Dmitriev via Witkoff. And the two of them definitely seemed to hit it off. But he is the point man. He is the guy pushing this forward for the White House. And it is interesting. There were also some statements by Dmitriev today that were fundamentally different in tone from Ushakov's statements, sort of suggesting that dialogue is happening, dialogue is possible. So the two of them do appear to be talking. And again, it's going to be very interesting tomorrow what, for example, the Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has to say about these latest developments.
It sure will be. And all of those tea leaves, so important. Matt Bodner, thank you so much, as always, for your fantastic reporting. We really appreciate it.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.